Good evening. You're listening to Rob Brinder on the day that Russia has invaded the Ukraine. So much to talk about and deal with, but while the West may not recognize the dangers posed by the occupation of the former Chernobyl plant, allegedly, whether it's fake news or not, it appears that Russian forces have taken control of that area. It remains a highly unstable threat, which could cause catastrophic fallout across Europe in the light of the Russian invasion. Many of us remember when that happened first time round. Joining us now is Dr. Anna Basu, CEO of Kromek, who has previously used pioneering technology to map radioactivity. Dr. Basu, what are and what remains the dangers of the Chernobyl plant? It's not in operation, is it?
Sure. I mean, the plant is not in operation, but what we are seeing is a spike in the overall radiation around the plant, particularly in the exclusion zone. Mm-hmm. And that's really probably as a result of more traffic, more people, probably heavier traffic than the exclusion zone is used to. So the dust that is radioactive is getting into the air and atmosphere, and that's what we are seeing at the moment, reportedly 20 times higher than what it was last week. So that threat is not, it's pretty confined to a certain extent. If the activities goes down, the dust will settle, and the overall threat may not be that high.
Can we just be clear about that so people understand? As a result of the amount of footfall in the exclusion zone around the radioactive Chernobyl, that's causing, if you like, the earth and dust, which is radioactive, to head up into the atmosphere, which could have serious health effects, to say the very least, and environmental effects for the people in Ukraine and beyond. Is that right?
Yes, certainly. There is a fairly large exclusion zone around the plant itself, and that's exactly what you described as happening. I mean, I think the danger is that there is a huge amount of radioactive material still inside the reactor itself, which is covered in an airtight envelope, a concrete envelope, and nuclear sort of plants or these places are not designed to be in middle of war zones. The danger is if there is really any blast or any heavy artillery shells that goes into the reactor itself and penetrates the outer shell, then of course the risks can get much higher.
Well, I'm going to ask you a very stark question, Dr. Basu. What are we talking about here? Let me ask you in a way that anybody else would. If there is a direct hit on that now covered reactor, what is the worst case catastrophic scenario?
Look, it can range from quite a lot of, the scenarios can be quite different depending on what the blast is. If you punch a small hole with small artillery or even a tank fire, I don't think the danger is that high. But if there is a significant sort of blast, which could be a missile strike or something like that, of course, that danger can be pretty high. And as we know, in 86, the amount of radiation that was emitted was 400 times that of the Hiroshima bomb. And that was felt way beyond the shores of Ukraine and the borders. And that's some of the radioactive dust actually traveled throughout, northwestern Europe and even on our Welsh valleys.
Yes, I was going to ask that question to those concerned. I remember, albeit I was a much younger man when that happened, that there was radioactivity and radioactive dust that found itself on the borders of our country. In the event that this was to, for want of a better way of putting it, go up. We're talking about an environmental disaster similar to what happened last time, right?
Look, the risks are very low because it has to be a catastrophic event. And I'm hoping that people will have enough sense not to endanger the whole area and the continent in that way. The risk, albeit, also lies in a different way because the radioactive material is Ukraine is quite a nuclear sort of capable country in terms of nuclear power plants. And so there are other nuclear power plants in Ukraine. And again, as I said, those plants are also, if they're in the middle of the firing line, can create real problems. But also nuclear material. So the dust we are talking about, these are radioactive dust. There is radioactive material within that area, and radioactivity can, if falls in the hands of bad actors, could be used as dirty bombs beyond the borders of Ukraine. So I think we have to be very careful in terms of managing the movement of radioactive material and in and out of Ukraine itself. So better monitoring, better sort of surveillance, so that not only an environmental sort of event, but also a terrorist-driven event.
Quite, and let's hope for all of our sakes that this stays in one piece. Thank you very much, Dr. Basu, for your very clear information there. And as you say, there may not be an immediate threat of catastrophic risk, but the reality is, no matter however optimistic we are, nobody can rely on the Putin government to act rationally within the ordinary remit of civilized behavior.